And sometimes the government does a very nice job of telling them a little bit more. And sometimes the government really doesn't have much more to say. I remember in the case of, I think it was Gabon, when they were giving their report, the NGOs had pointed out that in Gabon, or the situation in the daily life, can you tell us about this? And they simply said, well, according to the written laws that we have, our civil law, these things are not in place anymore. And that was about as much as they could say, because they had done nothing to really try and integrate some of the principles of discrimination against, or anti-discrimination against women into the customary law or into the written law. And so then once they have heard from the governments, they do a set of written recommendations which can be used for NGOs or people in the country itself to lobby their government, and will also be looked at again the next time the government gives its report. Yesterday I was at Ruhama and I asked them, have you heard yet what the recommendations were for Ireland as a result of their report? And the director was there and she said, yes, we had a meeting about that just the other day. And then those new recommendations will be used as a basis for some of the lobbying they do around trafficking. So we have brought to these CEDAW meetings women from Italy, Equatorial Guinea, Gabon, Dominican Republic. We didn't bring women, but we had a report. And then I think many of you know, in January, it's Australia's turn to give its report. 3 barristers will be coming from Australia. They're going to be sponsored by us, and they will be giving an alternative report. And the Brigidines have been working with them in Australia. We will also do an educational side event, that 2 educational events. One will be about the difficulty of prosecuting for trafficking worldwide, and the other is about how you form alliances to do lobby work internationally. And I think, again, this is a great benefit to NGOs, to government representatives, to learn new and more effective ways of doing things. So that's a couple of examples of ways that we've worked. I think one of the more effective things that we've done, in September, this past September, we knew that the governments were having a big meeting on the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals, how well they've been carried out. And you see 2 charts here that indicate some of that. You might want to take a look at them afterwards, and I will leave them for Anna and Margaret to inform perhaps your justice work, but they're also good posters to put up if you're going to be talking about those things. And to also talk about the reform of the UN. And the way UN works is they first develop a draft document. Then from that draft document, the governments negotiate the points of policy. So the original document, which was put out last March or April, had sections on development, section on human security, section on human rights, and reform of the UN. And in that whole document, there was one mention of women, no mention of environment. HIV/AIDS was mentioned 2 or 3 times, but it was sort of like egg on the wall. It wasn't pulled together. No mention of the Security Council, and no mention of the Human Rights Council, even though those had been ideas that had been out before. So when the President of the General Assembly invited NGOs, 200 members of the NGOs, to give testimony about what they thought was missing or what needed to be strengthened or what was erroneous in the draft document, we felt very fortunate because we were able to get 3 women to come over and be funded by the United Nations to be part of that testimony. We had one woman from India who worked with a Center for Trafficked Women in India. We had a woman from the Philippines who worked, from Mexico, who runs a human rights center, did a lot of work against sex tourism in Mexico. And we had a survivor of prostitution in the Philippines. Especially the last woman, the survivor of prostitution, was very moving in what testimony she gave. The others were very good; they were very pointed, but they were the woman who had been trafficked. It's very hard for her to talk about the experience without breaking down. But you can understand that with the trauma that she had been through. Her brother had actually sold her into prostitution. In any case, at the end of these civil society hearings, the next document draft that came out had a very good paragraph on women's issues and on gender equality. It had a much more coherent section on HIV/AIDS, and it had many more mentions of environmental issues. It also had something in it about the Security Council and something about the Human Rights Council. So we really could measure, in one sense, the direct effect of the NGO participation on the outcome document that they were negotiating. Because if you don't get it in the document, it doesn't get talked about. So the way we have to always work is well ahead of any event to get our ideas into the documents. We do regularly statements for the various commissions meetings that are there, and we have also made contributions to the reports of the Secretary General and the Special Rapporteur on different themes. Now, one of the things we hope for as we make more connection with our sisters and associates outside of New York is that as we find people who are working in areas related to the themes that are being discussed, we can draw on them for some of that information. So, for example, one of the reports that's coming out this year is on violence against women. We hope to be able to say to our board members, can you get some information from your women who are working in this field relating to violence against women, to give us information that might be useful to get into the Secretary General's report so we can include it in the statement, so we can include it in the policy that's developed. And then once the policy is developed, get back to the countries to let them know that they need to lobby about this with their national governments. So like our doll here with all these different levels, we've got that same kind of different level working. Now it's way too late for the violence against women one, but next year the theme, one of the major themes will be immigration and migration. And so I think some of your women are working in fields related to that. And if not, then in some cases you may know people who are working in those areas where there are breakdowns and injustices. So we're hoping for more, a better linkage there. I think what I'd like to do right now is to ask you for just a few moments to maybe buzz among yourselves and see if you have any questions you want to raise before I go back and pick up a couple more things. Okay? So I'll give you about maybe 5 minutes and then hear if you have any questions that you'd like to ask me. Or
Catherine, just to just tell us a little bit maybe about the world trafficking scene at the moment, just the situation as you understand it at the moment.
About these safe homes that are being set up for women and children escaping from trafficking.
Bad question.
Catherine, I was interested in the map you showed that there's so little representation of the whole east coast of Africa. And I know which is a problem.
I suppose one person we're aware of working strong in the UN is Mary Robinson, and her utter frustration, her belief in something like the UN as a hope for the world, but her utter frustration in working within the system. And maybe just a little bit of research I did one time on trafficking, how governments sign up so easily to all these treaties, but have a way out by saying their own parliamentary laws need to be changed for them to be ratified. And sometimes that's an excuse. And I think our own government has signed up to and that's its reason for not implementing.
Women that are represented in the United Nations.
Personally, I have a problem about them addressing single issues because the whole thing is so corrupt and so devastating. If you even sorted that out, there would be so many more, just as the injustice demanding. The world would really be no better.
Maybe one more question. In your experience of a number of years working with Unanima in the United Nations, how have you seen the voice of Unanima making a difference?
At the heart of the problem is the demand there is for commercial sex and
All right, well, let me take these and then a bit more. Started talking about trafficking. There was the description that it was the third most lucrative form of illicit trade, I guess you could call it, or trafficking. Drugs was first, armaments was second, and trafficking in women and children was third. Just about a month ago, I was reading some statistics from one of the groups that works internationally with trafficking, and they say that at the present time, trafficking of human beings for both sexual exploitation and labor and organs has become the most lucrative of all of the forms of illicit trading. So there seems to be an increase in trafficking in human beings. The current amount of profit that I've heard lately on that is $10 billion US a year is made from trafficking human beings. Particularly in the sexual exploitation, it's much less risky than trafficking in either drugs or armaments. And because a person can be sold over and over and over again, it's much more lucrative. The age of those who are trafficked and exploited seems to be getting younger and younger. The persons that I've talked with and heard speak related to trafficking say that 10 years ago, no, probably not that long ago, even 5 years ago, the average age on the streets or on a person's traffic that they could identify was around 16 or 17. And now it's more like 10 or 11. I don't know whether that's what's being seen here in Ireland, which, by the way, your representative at CEDAW said you did not have a problem with trafficking. Ruhama seems to have a little different idea whether you do or not. Some years ago, the major flow was from the Asian countries like the Philippines and Thailand into the United States and Northern Europe. Currently, the major flow seems to be from Eastern Europe after the breakup of the Soviet Union into, again, Europe and America. And when you look at patterns for trafficking, you can see that they follow the money. Women are trafficked into Northern Europe, Southern Europe too, for that matter. They're trafficked into Canada and the US. They're trafficked into Australia. They're trafficked into probably New Zealand too. And they're trafficked into Japan. They're trafficked into South Africa, rather. So they're primarily countries of destination are the wealthier countries. Nonetheless, they are also trafficked through other countries, so it's not that other countries don't have a problem with trafficking, but it's it seems to follow the money. There seems to be in worldwide trafficking high levels of involvement by a trafficking mafia, so that it's no longer a question of maybe an individual or a small group, but it's related to international criminal activity, which makes it highly dangerous to be trying to do anything to stop it. That's one of the reasons why many say that religious women are very well placed to be at the forefront of the movement against trafficking, because it's not the case that they have children and family members at home that will be endangered the same way. They have their religious congregations that support them, and there are networks of religious congregation. Now, that doesn't mean there's no danger. Clearly, there is danger. But it's, it just, again, it sort of underlines the placement we have. The other thing that I think we're well placed in is we have these wonderful nun networks. So, and the example I can think of is Italy and Nigeria. Often the women are trafficked from Nigeria into Italy, maybe other places beyond. And if we, as religious, have members in Nigeria and members in Italy, then we can really be aware of what's going on at both ends of this trafficking scene. When they arrive, try to work to protect them in any kind of way we can in the countries of destination. But also many times, because they have no papers, once those papers have been taken by the traffickers, they are deported back to their countries of origin. And there's nothing there for them either except to be re-trafficked. So if we have religious in the country of origin, they can protect, to a certain extent, some of them there too. So I think that network gives us a position that others would not have. And we've got to use that network, right? So that's the few things that I would say about the world trafficking scene. Comment about safe homes for women and children. I was speaking with the Sisters of St. Joseph of Annecy in England a few days ago, and they're in the process of trying to start a safe home. And they say it's been just almost a miraculous kind of thing that's happened. They've been working, I believe, through CORE and through others, diocesan groups of women religious as well. And as they describe what they want to do, they've just gotten tremendous support from the congregations of both men and women villages. They have now a home that's been promised to them for a certain number of years to use as a safe house.